To explain more about what we're seeing and what's behind it, I was joined by Bob Henson. He's a weather and climate science blogger with Weather Underground.
Heavy rains have been shown to be increasing in intensity with climate change. In other words, where it's raining, it's tending to rain harder. Where it's not raining, it's tending to not rain longer. So the two ends of the hydrologic spectrum are increasing. Now, a particular hurricane or typhoon may or may not have especially heavy rains. And sometimes it's the weaker storms that produce the heaviest rains and the worst flooding. In fact, this was not even as strong as a hurricane or typhoon. It was like an equivalent of a tropical storm in the US. It just parked in one spot for a long time. But those are the situations where the enhancement from climate change, the addition of moisture in the atmosphere through the warmer temperatures, can make a difference.
Well, in the imagery, seeing these houses floating away, very dramatic stuff. But we've been seeing a lot of that in Asia. I mean, we've seen typhoons, it seems like one right after the other, and some of them very severe. Is this tied to climate change?
Well, there's more of a balance globally between where typhoons are happening, where hurricanes are happening. So one area may be quite active, another may be less active. And this year, it's the Atlantic's turn to be very quiet. Even though we've had a fair number of named storms, the intensity of the storms in the Atlantic has been very low. Across the Pacific, it's been very high this year. And that's partially related to El Nino, because El Nino raises water temperatures in the central and eastern Pacific. It doesn't have such a strong relationship to typhoons, so the Asian typhoon experience this year isn't as readily explained by El Nino, and not really so much by climate change. I mean, the number of systems isn't expected to change that much with climate change, but the intensity should go up gradually. So we have had a lot of Category 3, Category 4, even several Category 5 storms. So you can make a plausible case that that number is being nudged up a little bit by climate change.
What about the severity? I mean, we're talking about the Pacific right now. You mentioned the Atlantic, kind of quiet, but of course we remember Hurricane Sandy here in the United States. The ferocity of some of these storms, has that changed?
Well, in the last, say, 10 or 15 years in the Atlantic, we've had a trend toward not so many storms coming into the U.S. with really high winds. The wind scale goes up, as we know, to Category 5, and it's been 10 years now since we've had even a Category 3 strike the U.S. So what's been happening is instead large hurricanes with less strong winds but covering a large area, pushing a lot of water. So that's what happened in the case of Sandy. It was the kind of storm surge you might have expected in a Category 5 hurricane, but not such a strong storm in terms of just the pure wind speed. So,
guys who follow the weather are always asked to make predictions. Usually it's the 5-day forecast, but what about the future? What do you see as we continue to track this this trend, or the basically evidence that perhaps climate change is affecting weather? What do you expect to see as we move forward?
I think when there are hurricanes, typhoons, even weak systems like Ital, which hits Japan, those systems will have the potential to produce more rain than they have in the past. There's always been the ability to have heavy rain, but that will probably increase. I would say in the next few years, we may have a slight trend toward fewer Atlantic hurricanes. There's some evidence for that. A paper just came out this week. That would probably produce more tornado or more hurricanes in the eastern Pacific. But any given year, anything could happen, right? You can get a Hurricane Andrew, which was in the middle of El Nino and devastated South Florida. So every year we have to be vigilant.
Anything can happen. So does that kind of describe how difficult it is to predict this sort of thing?
Well, hurricanes especially. I mean, there's some skill of predicting hurricane season intensity. You know, how many storms are there going to be in the Atlantic in a given year? We knew with El Nino there would probably be not too many. It looks like there's a good chance of a La Nina in 2016, so that will increase the odds of a busy Atlantic season next year. But the $64 million question is, will any of those hurricanes strike the U.S. or other land areas? And that's impossible to predict beyond a few days out.
Bob Henson, thanks for your time.
Thank you.